I'll tell you one thing. Scump leaving OpTic and making this announcement on Twitter is not helping what OpTic is trying to do right now, right? The current management of OpTic and now Immortals wants to try and steer clear from this as much as they can, right? They want to try and play their cards right and carefully because they realize using the name OpTic is fragile, right? It's not easy. It's like the whole world knows you own something that you didn't really make, and it's hard to share that and draw attention to that. So by Scump, who is the most well-known player, without question, in Call of Duty Esports, it gives a little bit more of a delay for what they probably want to try and do. And I'm not sure if it's a contract-related thing, but it's not really, to me, so much of a surprise that the OG, LA team is not really making any noise. There hasn't really been a whole lot. There hasn't really been much of a peep kind of coming from there. There's a lot of rumors of what their roster is going to be, but there hasn't really been much, at least as of yet. Now, that could change by the time this video goes up, but they're by no means one of the first teams that wants to get their stamp out there and say, yes, we are the LA OpTic and this is our roster. That's not happening, right? They want to try to delay for a little bit of time. Let kind of this time, this fragile time, start to kind of go away a little bit, and then they'll start to prepare. Because it really is the end of an era. And I hate using that term because people like to use it so often. But if there was ever a time to actually say it, it really would be now, right? Franchising is not only a big leap for Call of Duty in terms of the league, but also because of the brands and the changes that are occurring as well, right? OpTic has been the foundation for what has kept COD afloat during its rough years. Throughout the Jetpack era, as much as people love to talk about right now, and I've never heard more people in my life say, you know what, man? AW, not bad. IW, not the worst game we've ever seen. Throughout the Jetpack era, it wasn't the game that made the esport fun to watch. That's without question, right? When we were in the midst of that title, no one really liked it all that much. But the reason why it was exciting to watch this game be played rather than to play it yourself was because of the players. It was because of the storylines, more specifically, what I believe to be the best storyline in all of esports history, OpTic's hunt for a world championship. You honestly could not have written a better story than that. You couldn't detail the story of OpTic, even if you really wanted to. And the man that's been there and seen it all unfold and has been pretty much the load carrier throughout a lot of it, not obviously outside of Hex, but has been Scump, by far the hardest to see. 20+ major championships under OpTic, 2 X Games gold medals under the brand, a world championship, 7+ years in green. That's history, folks. History isn't often a term that you use when it comes to esports, but because of how fast things happen nowadays, that is the definition of history when it comes to esports. 7+ years in green and all of those accolades that I'm sure could carry on for a very long time. Eventually, and I'd love to get Scump on the show to ask him about this, but I truly believe that when Scump decided to leave OpTic back in Call of Duty Ghosts, it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because when he decided, after all the frustration and all the arguments about not winning, leaving OpTic was the best thing that he ever could have done for his career. Because in the midst of joining a new team and joining the next best thing at the time in Envy, he realized this isn't for me, right? This is just not for me. I don't enjoy this as much as I really thought that I would have. This isn't where I need to be. I don't like being on the other side of the green wall. The grass, in fact, is not as greener on the other side. It isn't as fruitful as I thought that it would be. So in just a few week turnaround, in that short time, Scump learned more about OpTic than he ever had in his career up to that point. He learned what it was like to be on the other side. And that short few week period catapulted him to stay with the brand over the next 5 Call of Duty titles and would have even lasted longer if not for what we'll call the situation of OpTic no longer being under control by Hex. This is where Scump planned to retire. This is where he intended to continue to call his home, regardless it made him and provided, rather, some of the best moments in Call of Duty esports history, he and this brand together, right? The Great One, the King, the Ninja himself, built what is the greatest player and organization story and success in Call of Duty esports history. And it's unfortunate because I feel like there's been so many announcements that have been happening recently. Obviously, the OpTic one being the primary source of all of that. But there's been so many stories that have happened that are kind of being dwarfed in comparison to what really is how big of a storyline this really could be. If Scump left last year, that's all everyone would have talked about. Literally, that's all anyone would have discussed. Oh my gosh, Scump is leaving OpTic. In this situation, though, since there are so many things happening, it's difficult to kind of put it in comparison because we're seeing so many changes all happen at once that it almost seems as if it's not really that big of a deal. But in reality, we know that it is, right? You look at the 7+ years, you look at the 20+ championships, the World Championship, the 2-time gold medalist, the stories, the history, the videos, everything, it really does. It is a huge thing to talk about. And in that time of OpTic, it really did carry the Call of Duty franchise and the Call of Duty esports side, more specifically, obviously, to continuing and being where it is at this very moment, right? 20 years. If Call of Duty still exists, we will not see a franchise and player relationship like this one. We will not see the accolades even come close to what we've seen with Scump and OpTic. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. If Call of Duty lasts 20, 30, 40 years, I don't see that coming close, at least for the nearby future, that's for sure. So let's take a look at this, right, from a bird's eye point of view. Well, let's look at this from a top perspective, if you will. And we're put in Immortal's shoes. A story unwillingly, better yet, a novel unwillingly, is being completed. And we have to write the sequel. It's got to be difficult. I mean, literally, we talk about all those accolades. We talk about how literally the OpTic dynasty and the team itself, the players have now gone on to do the other things. We talk about Nadeshot and 100 Thieves. We talk about what the other guys, the content creators, are doing right now. Literally, like, this has turned into a huge story that is now developing into other side series. To be the person who has to step in and say, hey, we're going to be the next guys involved. It's got to be difficult, especially when the audience is by no means on board. As the OpTic audience continues to learn more about the future of the brand, Scump was the piece that could have helped that. And obviously, that isn't necessarily where he wants to be. It's rumored that he wants to continue on and be with Hex in Chicago with Energy. But Scump venturing elsewhere for the first time in 5 years, and with the history that he has, is only making the new age of OpTic that much more difficult to begin.